So this week's parasha has something quite interesting. It could be a few years ago we mentioned it in passing, and I said one day we'll get back to it. I heard this shiur maybe 15 years ago in Brooklyn from Rabbi Sutton, and I thought this is an interesting idea that's not so well known. Our parasha has loads. A lot of people focus on the end of the parasha, talks about Moshe Rabbeinu and what happened, and we've discussed in the past with Eldad u'Medad min Navim b'Machaneh, and what exactly happened over there, who were Eldad u'Medad, and they're suddenly prophesying, and Miriam speaks Lashon Hara, she gossips about Moshe Rabbeinu, about the black woman that he took a black woman, is the words of the Torah, Tzipporah, African princess, etc. We've discussed in the past some interesting concepts. And there's something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the Torah in this week's parasha that I thought we would talk about. They have something over here, I don't know if you can see, on what's backwards nun, right? You have a backwards nun, 1 and 2. I wouldn't be surprised, but anybody who writes certain things, you have parentheses, you have brackets. That concept of brackets probably came from this part of the Torah. Now, if I was to ask you how many books do we have in the Torah, you'll tell me, what do you mean? Obviously, Chamisha Chumshei Torah, there's 5 books of the Torah. Well, every little kid knows that. It's in the who knows one. Right? Uncle Maishi taught us that when we were little. So everybody knows there's 5 books of the Torah. But the commentaries say very interestingly that potentially there aren't 5 books of the Torah, there's actually 7. You have the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, the book of Shemot, Exodus, you have the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, you have the book of Divari, of Bamidbar, of Numbers, up till here, that's book number 4. These 2 psukim, which we'll get into, are their own separate book of the Torah. That's book number 5. The rest of the book of Bamidbar is book number 6 of the Torah, and then the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, is book number 7. So that's something that's quite peculiar, something that's, we need to understand, what does that exactly mean? Why does it have these backwards nun brackets? Why are they backwards? What are the psukim that are in these brackets? Why are they there? What's the point of it? It's interesting stuff. Excuse me. So we need to look at what the Torah discusses right before that and right afterwards. The Torah says, Vayisu mehar Hashem, they leave the mountain of God, i.e. Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, derech shoshet yamim, 3-day trip, ve'aron brit Hashem noseh lifnehem. Most people don't realize, when they traveled in the desert, the Aron, the ark, traveled in front of them, clearing the way, making sure everything's going to be smooth, easy sailing, easy going. They have the clouds protecting them from any potential enemies, which we'll get back to. And you have the Aron traveling in front of them, derech shloshet yamim latur lahem menucha, to make sure that everything is menucha, is peaceful. Va'anan Hashem alehem, the cloud of God is on top of them, yomam bin so'am min ha'machaneh, that when they travel, the cloud of Hashem's on top of them. Then you have these backward nuns, these 2 psukim. What are in the 2 psukim, which we'll get through in depth? Vahi bin so Aaron. We just said that the Aaron would travel. We know at the end of this book you have Parashat Maseh, talks about the 42 different destinations and places that the Jewish people camped. Sometimes it was for as short as a week. Sometimes it was for a year. That they are one place, maybe even 19 years they didn't travel. We see in the book of Joshua, that when they had to go into Israel, they need to have the Brit Milah. They never knew when they were going to have a circumcision, and therefore, they never knew when they were going to travel, and you can't travel if you just got circumcised, and therefore they didn't have Brit Milah till they entered into Israel during their 40 years in the desert. Vahi ben so'a Aaron, when the ark would travel, Vayomer Moshe, what would Moshe Rabbeinu say? Kuma Hashem, get up God, v'yafutzu oivecha, and it will take away your enemies, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, and we will take away all those that hate you from in front of you. Yesterday I bumped into Rabbi Hartman, and he told me a whole beautiful Dvar Torah. We'll leave it for another time. What's the difference between oivecha and sonecha? When Hashem speaks to Avraham Avinu, he speaks about oivecha. When Hashem speaks to Rivka, he talks about sonecha. What's the difference between the enemies and those that hate you? Who are those that hate us and who are those that are just our enemies? Certain people, when it comes to fighting over land, which right now is a hot topic, those are the enemies. But in theory, if we're not in Israel, and they don't feel that's their land, if we were all over the world for thousands of years, Yishmael didn't attack us. They are our oivim. If we have mutual things we want, they'll fight with us, but otherwise they leave us alone. Then there's Son Echa, those that hate us. Hitler, Yimach Shemo, didn't care. He's in Germany, we're in Poland. I'm going to come get you. You're in Saloniki, I'm going to come get you. That's Son Echa. Right? But another discussion for another time properly. What's Oivecha? What's Son Echa? That's the pasuk we say when the Aron travels, when we open the Torah. Umnocho Yomar, what do we say when we put it away? When Nucho, when we're Minucha, when we're resting. What do we say? Shuva Hashem. Shuva Hashem, return to us, God. Revivot. Reviva is 1,000. Revivot would be, Revivot is 10,000. So Reviva is 10,000. Revivot would be plural, so it would be 20,000. Alfei Yisrael. And then Alfei is another double 1,000, be 2,000. So Uvnucho Yomar Shuva Hashem Revivot Alfei Yisrael. Return to us, Hashem, 22,000 of Israel. This is its own Sefer Torah. This is its own book in the Torah. This is its own fundamental, essential thing. And we need to understand that. And then the Torah continues. The people were complainers. Ra be'oznei Hashem. It's interesting. I would have thought it should say be'enei Hashem, in the eyes of God. It says Ra be'oznei Hashem, bad in the ears of God. Again, en lo demut haguf, en lo guf. God doesn't have any physical being. It's one of the 13 fundamental beliefs, but the Torah uses terminology we can appreciate. God gets angry, doesn't have emotions. God sees, God hears. That helps us understand and appreciate. So that's what we're saying over here, that the people were complaining and it was bad in the ears of Hashem. Vayishma Hashem, vayicharapo. God hears this and he gets very upset. Vatavaer bam esh. A fire comes down from heaven. Vatochal beksei machane. It eats the edge of the camp. And that's what happens over here. Hashem gets upset at the Jewish people and a fire comes down and he kills some people. Vayitzak Amel Moshe, the people, they come and they cry out to Moshe. Vayitpalel Moshe el Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses prays to God. And what happens? Vatishka ha'esh, and the fire stops. Vayikra Hashem makom hahu Tav'era, the name of that place was called Tav'era, where there was a fire. Ki bara bam esh Hashem, because the fire of God consumed the people and killed people. The very next pasuk, the next verse tells us, V'asafsuf asher bekirbo, those that were there, that were amongst the camp, hit avu ta'ava, they desired a desire. And I think 4 years ago, we explained, what does it mean, desire to desire? There's certain natural desires that we have. Everybody has a natural desire for kavod, for people to acknowledge when they do something. It's innate, we're born with it. If you go to the park, and you have a little 2-year-old, and they're climbing up, and they say, Mommy, look. I went down the slide, I climbed up. They want that clap. We have a natural desire. People should acknowledge when we do something good and give us some TLC. We have a natural desire for companionship. We have a natural desire for kavod. We have a natural desire for physical relations. Right? Opposite gender, you have a natural desire. Men, especially for women, right, have this desire, and that's natural. That's inborn. But then there's desires that we create. People aren't born with a desire to gamble. People aren't born with a desire to drink alcohol. We create that desire. So hit avu ta'ava means they desired the desire. They created this desire. What desire did they create? Vayashuv vayifku b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people, they come and they complain. And what do they say? Mi achilenu basar. Why are we not getting any meat? Zacharnu tadaga. We remember the fish. Asher nochal b'mitzrayim chinam. There was loads of it. Right? The Nile was the main source of irrigation and also sustenance. The fish, et hakishuim, the squash and the zucchinis, et ha'avatachim, the watermelons, et ha'chatzir, ha'betzelim, the onions, the shumim, and the garlic. We remember the good times. Again, in previous years we discussed this at length. What were they really missing? The man. The Torah goes out of its way now to tell us how amazing the man was. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the meat. It was that they didn't want to have this pressure that if they sin, then right away they get punished. And I could look online and try and find previous year's recordings. We went through that at length. What does a God do? Hashem says, you want meat? I'll give you meat. And he sends down the Slav. He sends down these birds and they start eating the birds and they start choking on the birds. Not our discussion for now, but I don't know if we'll have time to get some halakha, so maybe we'll throw it in. says Odem ben shinehem. It's still in between their teeth. The meat's still between their teeth and they start choking. This is where, when the commentaries discuss milk and meat, eating milk and meat together, and waiting after eating meat, the Rambam says, why do you need to wait 6 hours? In general, I was listening to a nice Dvar Torah this week that's quite practical from Rabbi Friend. The source of not eating milk and meat is from the Torah. But what if I don't eat it together? How long do I need to wait? So the Gemara, there's a rabbi, I believe it was Mar Zutra, he says, I'm not like my dad. My dad was really righteous, big tzaddik. He would eat meat and then wait, 24 hours before he had any milk. I'm not such a tzaddik, I'm not so righteous, I wait one meal to the next. That's the Gemara. That's our whole source. So now the commentaries discuss. Tosafot, which nobody holds like except for maybe the Dutch people, he says it doesn't mean the next meal, it means you clear the table, you say Birkat Hamazon, you can have a nice steak for lunch and have ice cream for dinner. Nobody else holds like that. The Rosh and Rashi say that when you eat meat, it gives a strong flavor in your mouth, and that flavor stays for up to 6 hours. The Rambam, based on the pasuk we just quoted, it says Odem ben shinehem, the meat's still in between their teeth. And based on that, we see that the meat can get stuck in your teeth, and for it to lose its status as meat, you need to wait 6 hours. Then the commentaries discuss, all right, what if I'm not eating meat? Is chicken the same? Chicken doesn't get stuck in between your teeth. What if I just have chicken soup? Right, etc., etc. Not our discussion, halachic discussion today, but we see from here, this is where the Rambam gets this idea that the meat gets stuck in between your teeth. Odem ben shinehem, it's between their teeth and they start choking on the meat. So, we're giving a lot of facts, we'll give some more just general ideas and then we'll tie it all together, Be'ezat Hashem. The Ramban, Nachmanides explains, why do you have these brackets, these two psukim? Because there's something in Judaism called a chazakah, and if something happens 3 times in a row, that's already, it's set. It's a chazakah. We don't want to have 3 bad stories in a row. Therefore, you have these brackets, these backwards nuns with the special 2 verses that are its own book of the Torah, to make sure that it puts a barrier in between the bad stories. Now, the last 2 stories make sense. What happens? The people complain, God sends down a fire. Bad story. The people complain again, they want the meat, God sends down the meat and they choke on it. Bad story. But what was the first bad thing? It just says, Vayisu Mahar Hashem. They left Har Sinai, they left the mountain of God. Where's the bad story? So Tosafot uses the example, he says, Kitinok haboreach mebet hasefer, like a kid running away from school. They were running away from Har Sinai, running away from school. They were saying, Maspik far, enough already, Chalas na, we're done, we have too many rules, we don't want to have more rules, God's just piling them on, we can't. And that helps us understand also these backward nuns. The Jewish people's attitude is, it's too much. It's too much. We don't want to have to do this. Now again, it's the same underlying symptom as to what they were doing with the man, complaining about the man. It's that they didn't want to have to work hard. There's differentiations between working hard and running away and understanding it's too much. And we'll have to explain what happens after they start choking for the meat and then they end up, Moshe prays for them. Moshe says to Hashem, I can't deal with these people anymore. Maspik far, enough already. I'm not their mother. I'm not here to nurse them. And Hashem says, don't worry, we'll get you 70 elders. Shivim zekenim. How does that help the situation? How are the 70 elders going to help? What does this mean over here that it's its own book of the Torah? So our rabbis tell us there's a few different understandings and proofs. There's a certain pasuk that talks about the 7 different books. That's one thing. But our rabbis tell us that if you look at the first pasuk in the Torah, how many words does it have? 7. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. 7 words. You look at the last pasuk in the whole Torah, you go to Parashat V'zot Aberacha, Ulchol hayad hachazaka, Ulchol hamara hagadol, Sher asa Moshe le'ene kol Yisrael. 12 words. If you count these 2 psukim of Vahi ben Soa Aaron, the first pasuk has 12 words, and the second pasuk has 7 words. So the same way the Torah, the Bible starts with 7 and ends with 12. Over here also you have 7 and 12. Obvious question, it's out of order. Right? Also, it starts with the letter Vav, Vahi ben Soa Aaron, ends with the word Yisrael. The Torah, we say every day, the men at least say when they do korbanot, it says halichot olam lo. Al tikre halichot ela halachot. Don't read it that halichot, which means travels. We're talking about traveling in the desert. Halichot olam lo. It's its own word, lo, to it. So that's the first letter and the last letter of these two verses. Spell lo. Again, it's out of order. Why is it out of order? Halichot olam lo. And we say every day in our prayers, Al tikre halichot ela halachot. Don't read it as travels, read it as halachot. And the rabbis learn out, whoever learns two halachot, whoever learns two laws every day, muftach lo shu ben olam haba, is promised that he will have a portion in the world to come. Why is this out of order? What are these travels? Who cares if it has 12 words and 7 words? The Baal HaTurim also says if you count the letters. How many letters are in these two psukim? 85 letters. Why is that important? So halacha lema said, the halacha is that if somebody has a Sefer Torah and it's missing loads of words, over the years it got rubbed out. Some things are just missing, or over time it faded. And unfortunately, where this Torah is being housed, we'll say it's in a synagogue, it's in a shul, there's a fire. Now, am I allowed to carry on Shabbat? I'm not allowed to carry. But to save a Sefer Torah, I'm allowed to carry. Now, in the Aron Kodesh, you have the Sefer Torah, you have those that are kosher, and you have those that they don't use them anymore, they're not kosher anymore, and to fix them is too much hassle. So sometimes you have a Sefer Torah, it's missing words, it's missing. What's the minimum requirement to be able to carry it into the public domain and save this Torah? If I'm not mistaken, 85 words. Why? Because 85 letters. Because over here, we learn from these two psukim, its own Torah is 85. What's going on over here? The Brit Milah. Brit Milah is Gematria 85. What is this all about? So the rabbis explain, what is the backwards nun? Nun in Aramaic is how you say fish. You have backwards fish. Now, we might not realize it, but many of us, every single day with our kids, we discuss this concept. We say, many people, they put their kids to sleep, they say Shema, and then what do they say? They sing the pasuk, Hamalach hagoel oti mikora. Yaakov Avinu, our father Jacob says, the angel. We know that Yaakov Avinu, there's angels going up and down the ladder. He sends the angels to speak to Esav. He constantly has angels surrounding him. We've discussed that in the past. What does he say? Hamalach hagoel oti mikora, the angel that protects me from all bad. Yivarech et hane'arim, should bless these children. Yikareh behem shemi, they should be called on my name. That's why we're called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. That was his other name. V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz, they should be like dag, like fish. Fish is a bracha. Fish are under the water. There's no ayin hara. People don't see them and give them the evil eye. But in general, what does it mean we should be like fish? The first commandment in the whole Torah is multiply like the fish. There should be many of you. Pru urvu miluat haaretz. You should have many children. What is special about fish? Why are we compared to fish? I had a guy call me up one time. He said, Rabbi, I want a name of biracha for my company. He says the name is ultimately irrelevant. It's an online company. It's the legal name, but I want something that has to do with blessing. So I said to him, you should call your company V'yidgu Larov. Dag, the fish. And he loved it. He spoke to his business partner, wasn't religious at all, and they called their company, I believe it was Idgu. Right, for dag, for fish, because there's a bracha, there's a blessing in the fish. Why are we as people, Bnei Yisrael, compared to fish? Why is the backwards nun fish? What's the whole picture over here? We gave a lot of facts. Let's understand what's really going on over here. The Gemara tells a famous story. In the times of Rabbi Akiva, anybody who taught Torah in public was getting killed. And Rabbi Akiva didn't care. He's teaching Torah in public. And somebody says to him, isn't it dangerous? Aren't you worried? You might give up your life. You might get caught. And he did get caught and got killed. Why would you do that? It's not worth the risk. Rabbi Akiva gave the famous example. There was once a fox who saw fish and said to the fish, it's dangerous for you. There's all these fishermen trying to get you out of the water. Why don't you come over here and live on the land? And the fish says, I thought you were a sly fox. Surely you know. If it's dangerous in the water, it's so much more dangerous outside the water. What was happening over here? The Bnei Yisrael are by Har Sinai, and they say, there's too many rules, there's too many laws, it's too heavy. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this. Being an Orthodox Jew, too much pressure. Can't do it. No way. So what happens over here? They're running away. Hashem says, that's the source of your problems. That you don't understand that it's a privilege and that you're lucky and you shouldn't be running away. Right? I was having a discussion with a bunch of students in Hasmonean. I'm not sure how we got there, but I said to them, let's say right now you found out that in the hospital there was a mix-up, and really, you're not from the Bnei Yisrael. Would you now choose to convert? And they were like, yeah, I guess so. I'd probably take a few days off, go have a good time, and I said, okay, I appreciate your honesty. I said, personally, there's nothing that I feel that I'm missing. Nothing that I feel that I'm missing. It doesn't tempt me a cheeseburger, bacon. I'm sure it's good, but it doesn't, I'm happily married. One of the kids was like, yeah, okay, if you're married, maybe. But I said, even not married, you should appreciate it. I was talking to a guy, he said to me, the first 35 years of my life, I went around every night partying, getting a different person. And now I'm married, and it's hard for me in my marriage because, if you're used to a lot of different flavors of ice cream, and then you're told you can only have one, even if you really like that one, you miss the other ones. But if you only know ice cream to be one flavor, every time you have it, it's amazing. I said, if we truly believe that Hashem gave us the Torah, He knows what's best for us, and He says, this is what you need to be eating, this is what you need to be drinking, this is what you need to not be talking about, don't speak Lashon Hara, as we see at the end of the parasha, make sure you do this, don't do that. If we believe that Hashem knows what's emet, and He created us, and He says this is what you need to follow, then why would you be tempted for anything else? The people over here, that wasn't their attitude. The attitude was, it's so much pressure, it's so hard, it's so challenging, I can't do this anymore. There's so many rules. They're looking to run away. So Hashem says, look, we need to put a barrier between that attitude and all the problems that you might have. So we're going to have Vehi ben Soharon, V'yomer Moshe, Kuma Hashem. Hashem, please, V'yafutzu oivecha minusum sanecha panecha. This is talking about people traveling. We're in Galut. And we don't have a country that's ours. For thousands of years, we're going to all different countries. What do we need to remember? We need these backwards noons. We need to understand if you take a fish out of the water, it's going to die. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. We are noon. We are the fish. Now, anybody who ever went fishing? I went a few months ago fishing. Not a fan. The boat was not even that choppy, but I just couldn't take it. I ended up, I was not happy. Let's just put it that way. 3 hours, I just couldn't do it. But if you go fishing and you catch some fish, or you ever saw a fish that's taken out of the water, what happens? It's flapping all over the place. If you don't know any better, you think, wow, this fish is having the time of its life. This is awesome. Look how lucky the fish is. Meanwhile, it's slowly dying. Some people look and they say, wow, following the Torah and the mitzvot, it's overbearing, it's a burden. I wish I could be a fish out of the water. And they go and they're clubbing and they're partying and they're drinking and they're dancing and they're grinding and they're twerking and they're whatever shigaon they have. And they think it's the best. And people might look at them saying, wow, looks like they're happy. But ultimately, it's that slow death. Because we understand for us, the only way we can survive is in the water. The people in the first parasha, Vayisu Mahar Hashem, they're running away from Hashem. They're saying, I don't want to be religious. They're saying, I don't want to be connected. So Hashem puts these brackets, says you're going to be in Galut. You know how you're going to have to survive? It's going to be challenging. Things are going to seem backwards. The noons are backwards. Halichot olam lo, the law is backwards. First, you have the 12, and then you have the 7. Even though the real Torah starts with 7 and has 12. Everything is mixed up. 85 letters is also Gematria, Peh, mouth. And I think the first year we gave Shurim, 4 or 5 years ago, we discussed the koach hadibur and the strength of the mouth, and we saw it in every parasha, in Ba'alotecha, in Shelach, in Korach, in Chukat, in Pinachas, etc., etc., etc. Bilam, we see that in the parasha Balak. Not our class for now, but Peh. Now we just had Shavuot, and we received the Torah, and there's the 5 books of the Torah, or in this case the 7 books of the Torah, and then there's Torah Sheba'al Peh. Anybody who's ever learned Mishnah or Gemara knows it's not easy. You read the Mishnah and it's confusing. And the only way you can really understand the Mishnah quite often, you have loads of questions, is when you have the Gemara. And even when you learn Gemara, if there was Chas v'Shalom, no Rashi, we'd be lost. Rashi helps us understand what the Gemara is talking about. But anybody who went to yeshiva, they break their head, and the enjoyment of learning the Gemara is only when you're really breaking your head. And it's very challenging, and then you understand it. That's the ultimate enjoyment. Hashem says, to protect you in your travels, you need to understand you can't be a fish out of the water. To protect you in your travels, you need to have that you have to break your head, that things seem backward. You look at the world and it seems like we're backwards sometimes. It seems like we're not understanding. The world looks at us and says, well, you're doing this wrong. Now, we look, again, not looking to be politically, you look at the world and you have all these people bashing Israel, most recently in Gaza. We look at it and say, well, Israel has to defend itself. Surely you understand that Hamas is a terrorist organization. There was a lot of signs, I've been saying this for years. It says free Palestine. I agree, free them from Hamas. I think it's terrible that the top 15% of the people that are getting tens of millions, if not billions in government aid are being taken to just create rockets and tunnels and cause terror. I feel bad for the average kid over there, of course, and the fact that they're being used as shields. We look at it and say that this is how the enemies work. V'yanusu oivecha misanecha, right? But the rest of the world doesn't see it like that. And they're winning the social media war. Not our discussion for now, but it's confusing. If you don't know any better and you're just reading social media, it's very hard to understand. And even if you understand, it's hard to understand and know what's the right decision, wrong decision, how to do it, what's the best way to do it, how do you deal with the international pressure. It's not a simple situation. We're traveling. We're in Galut. Vahi ben so Aaron, the Torah is traveling. And Hashem says, Kumma Hashem, Hashem, we need you. And even in the countries where we're settled, what do we say? Shuva Hashem, Revivot Alfei Yisrael. Hashem, please dwell with us. 22,000 of Yisrael. What does that mean? Shuva Hashem, Revivot Alfei Yisrael. What's this 22,000? What's going on over there? So where do we see the number 22,000? Our rabbis tell us we see the number 22,000. It's 22,000 Leviim. The people who serve Hashem, the people who dedicate their lives to sit in today's day and age and learning Kollel, to be the rabbis. What are we telling Hashem? Hashem, we got the message. We can't be a fish out of water. We can't survive without the Torah. We need to have a connection to you, Hashem. It's backwards nuns, backwards fish, and it's confusing. But ultimately, we appreciate that we need to be, these brackets, this is what's going to protect us from the fire. This is what's going to protect us from the complaining. This is what's going to protect us from running away from our Yahadut. It's understanding Hashem, we can't survive without it. And we need to have those Revivot Alfei Yisrael, that tribe of Levi, or in today's modern terminology would be the Kolelim, and the Yeshivot, and the people sitting studying Torah. That's what's going to protect us, Hashem. And it has throughout the generations. It makes no sense that we're still here. But we got the message over here. Hashem says we need to make brackets. We need to teach you what it's all about. You need to understand. We're meant to multiply like the fish. That's only going to be in the water. You can't multiply outside the water. Technically, we should by far be the biggest nation in the world. I remember seeing a statistic one time. It said 1,000 years ago, there was 1 million Chinese people and there was 1 million Jews. You do the math. How many people are there in China? 1.7 billion. And that's with population control that you can only have one kid for many years. But because many people, unfortunately, didn't get this message enough, you have people looking to run away. And you have people that think that there'll be a fish outside the water. Hashem says this is what's going to protect you. And the Torah, that seems backwards, that you have to break your head to understand. You look around the world and it almost seems like they're against. There's oivecha, there's sonecha, but it's not easy. We say, Hashem, we understand what's going to protect us and we support the Revivot Alfei Yisrael. But at the same time, there also has to be Shivim Zikenim. There has to be 70 elders. Because the fact that there's those rabbis sitting in Kollel, you might say, look, there's these guys in Bnei Brak, there's these guys in Getzad, I give them my donation, I support them. I appreciate we need Torah, I appreciate we need water, I appreciate that this is our survival, great. So I support the guys over there. Hashem says, pick me 70 Zikenim. How did it work? Because there was 6 from each tribe. You do the math. 6 times 12 is 72. That's why there's Eldad U'Medad. They weren't part of those 72. They decided we'll leave it, even though they were chosen, as we've discussed in previous classes. But if I tell you, Torah, 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 you say, great, very nice, I support Torah, rabbis in Bnei Brak and Getzad in Jerusalem. But if you know somebody and you say, hey, I know him, I know her, she's one of the elders of the community. They're a regular, normal person. And they learn, and they have Torah, and they're religious, and that's amazing. She's not here now. They called me up from Hasmonean Girls, and they were saying they have a certain program that they want to do, And would I be available? I'm not available. What would be my recommendation? And I said, if it was me, think outside the box. I said, and I mentioned a couple of women. One of them normally comes to the shiur. I said, maybe have this woman and that woman, and have them be running that program. I don't know if they would commit every week, but they're role models. They can pick a certain series of classes. Say we're going to talk about prayer, and we're going to talk about modesty, and we're going to talk about, and they're put together, and they speak well, and they'll make sure they prepare. But they're role models. They're normal, regular people, not Rebbitzins, and they're able to influence these other people. And people say, well, okay, if she could do it, then I could do it. If you tell people, I go to a class, really? Okay, you're normal, and you go to a class, maybe I should start going to classes. There had to be the Shivim Zekenim, there had to be the elders, because there had to be people from each tribe that people say, all right, she's one of us. And she also does it. She understands the importance of Torah, and the importance of Chesed, and the importance of volunteering, and the importance of making sure. Ultimately, don't tell the men I told you this, but I tell them as well, it's the women that run the show. The success of a house, and the level of tzniut, and the level of kashrut, and where they usually go on holiday, it's the women. The women are the ones that have to understand this message. When we get the Torah, 2 weeks ago, we received the Torah, and what does it say? First comes Bet Yaakov. First comes the women, then comes the men. The women are the akeret bayit, they're the ones running the house, and if they understand and prioritize what it means Torah, and that we can't live without it, and that it might look enticing, but you're a fish out of water, you're a backwards noon, and that you can't be running away and having attitude that it's just too much. There's a terminology that I discovered in England. It's called CBA. Can't be asked, can't be bothered. It's not that I'm anti, I'm just whatever. I'm good, I'm in bed, I'm comfortable. I have my Netflix, I have my thing. It's a hassle to have to get up, to come, to go, to do. No. We understand that's the only way that we have survived. It's the only way we can survive. When we go into the Galut, Vahi bin Sa'aron, when we get exiled from one country to the next, what does Hashem say? Kuma Hashem. We need your help to be able to stand strong against the Oivecha and the Sonecha. And once we settle, still we understand we need to support the Leviim, support the Kolelim, support the Yeshivot, support Torah, Revivot Alfei Israel. Hashem, that's where you're going to dwell. If we have that, we know that you dwell with us. If not, Chas v'Shalom. Those brackets, that protects us from the fire. That protects us from the Asafsuf, Asher B'Kirbo, Avut Ta'ava, from all the desires. It protects us from the complaining, and it protects us from the attitude of too much. CBA, too much hassle, too much headache, overwhelming, overbearing. No. We understand who we are and what we are, and ultimately, that starts in the home. That starts what's ingrained in the child. Where are their priorities? What are they doing? Why are they doing? You also have the opposite extreme in this week's parasha. The beginning of the parasha talks about the menorah. At the end of last week's parasha, you had the 12 Nisi'im, head of each tribe gives korbanot, gives sacrifices, and Aharon comes and says, I also want to. I would have thought you don't have to. I also want to. Hashem says, you'll have the menorah. Don't worry. We'll take care of you. That'll be eternal. You have in this week's parasha the concept of Pesach Sheni. People come to Hashem and they say, we missed out on the Korban Pesach. I would have said, you missed it. Yesterday I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't daven. The person says to the rabbi, you missed it. What can you do? You can't do something twice. If you missed it, you missed it. What are we saying now? No. They created the concept of Pesach Sheni. We're yearning, we're desire, we can't wait. That has to be our attitude. We're so lucky. And if we missed it, it should bother us that, how do I make up for that I missed? But you missed it, it's not your fault. I understand, but it doesn't matter. I want it. If ingrained in ourselves and in our children. And the way that our children see it, live it, is by seeing it. It's not just they hear about it, it's not just we talk the talk, we live it. If they see by our houses, by our Shabbat table, we talk about different things and we prioritize, then what happens? Then they live it. Then it becomes the norm. Then they understand we can't live without the water. We can't live without the Torah. V'yidgu larov b'kerev haaretz. If you want to be b'kerev haaretz, you want to have Eretz Yisrael, if you want to be able to grow and be who we should be, it's only when we're fish in the water. When we have the nuns, when we have the brackets, and we protect ourselves, oivecha sonecha, and we have the revivot alfei Yisrael. We also have the nisi'im. Every lady here can be a nasi, of the zekenim, can be of the elders, can be of the people that show the community, hey, we're normal, regular, and we volunteer. We're normal, regular people, and we give. We're normal, regular people, and we learn. We're normally regular people, and you can dress modestly, and you can look a certain way, and hey, we're role models. That was the job of the Zikanim. Moshe says, I can't do it. Allah says, don't worry, we'll pick some more elders. How's that going to help? Because they're able to relate to the elders. These were people that were there for us. She tells us who were these Zikanim back in Egypt, only a couple of years ago. Back in Egypt, they were the taskmasters. They were the capos, and they took the hit for the people. People say, wow, these people, they care about us. They love us. They took the hit for us. And they're also learning Torah. They also understand the importance of Torah. Must be it's legit. Must be it's true. That is our job over here. That's the idea of these backwards nuns, that we have to understand that there's no way we can survive without the water. Again, the number 70 elders, there's a lot there in the number 70 nifashot go down to Israel, go down to Mitzrayim, and 70 is a number that we see over and over and over and over. Right? 70 is the lifespan of a person. Everything ties back into this, that it's our life. The elders show us what is our lives going to be about. That's 70. It's only with Torah. It's only when we're fish in the water. Hopefully that we discussed all those things. Brit Milah, 85, the same way 85, that protects us from the goyim, separates us, differentiates us, makes us who we are. Torah Shabal Peh 85, those letters of who we are, that's only when it's backwards and when it's confusing, when it doesn't seem. If it was easy to be a Frum Yid, then everybody would do it. We're not looking for it to be easy. We understand it has to be before the Jewish people were running away from Har Sinai, it was meant to be very different. But Hashem says, now that I see your attitude is, it's a hassle. The only way you're really going to be able to live it and enjoy it is when you have the revivot, you support the Torah, you see people that are normal also learning Torah, and you understand that without this, we cease to exist. We're fish out of water. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. That's the nuns, the backward nuns. That's the brackets that protects us from fire and from desire. So Be'ezrat Hashem will do our best to live these lessons, and if we're able to do that, then we will be zocher, will merit to have the Malach HaGoel, the angel that Yaakov Avinu blessed us, that protects us, will be there for us, always making sure that we're safe from oivecha and from sonecha.